What's going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video, and today we are going to be finishing our beginner and intermediate guide to budget options with the green element. But before we do, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. It helps me out a ton as a new YouTuber as we continue to try and climb to 500 subscribers by the end of January. So today we're going to be taking a look at, as we have with the previous installments in this series, some budget options for the green element, and we're going to take a look at gold border characters, then we'll take a look at a few silvers, and we'll finish it up with even a couple of bronze for some team relay dungeons. So let's get it started. So the first character I want to talk about is Vanessa Wonderland. Her leadership skill is going to increase green element fighters' attack by 45% and their HP by 10%. So pretty good leadership skill. There's better ones out there even amongst the budget options, so probably not somebody you'd put as a leader. But when you go ahead and you take a look at her cores here, she's going to increase critical rate by 7% for 5 seconds for each attack, and that resets upon landing a crit. And she's going to increase skill damage by 7% for 5 seconds for each attack, and that stacks up to 5 and is removed when she is attacked. So she has some decent cores. It's really not why you're going to use her. She's a really good damage dealer overall, specifically for a balance type. But if you take a look at her skills, she's going to have a chance to randomly apply one of the following for 2 seconds upon a successful skill, including Guard, which is Stun, Freeze, or Petrify. She also has Super Armor on her kit, so her S1 is pretty interesting. It's kind of unique with her, where she's going to have the chance to apply a random debuff to the enemy, which is pretty good overall. She's a pretty nice budget option, specifically for kind of the hard to find status ailment, which is Petrify for a gold border character. You don't see it all too often on these characters, so on her it's pretty nice. Having super armor is pretty nice as well, but really with her, she is more of a kind of just generalist for story mode and some of the lesser difficulty dungeons and things of that nature. She's probably not a character you're going to take into a lot of different boss modes and get much use out of. But as far as a steady, strong pick for new players or intermediate players that just kind of need to get by with a decent budget option, she's going to definitely be useful in that regard. And she is one of the better budget options for the green element. So overall, I would say with her that she's definitely worth a little bit of investment, but as is the case with any of these characters, you'll toss her aside when you're done. So let's move on to the next one. Next up is going to be Summer Night Mary. Her leadership skill is going to increase swimsuit fighters' attack by 55%, so pretty good leadership skill if you want to pair her with other swimsuit characters. But really what you're going to use her for is you're going to use her for her chill damage. So if you look at her cores here, as you can see, I have not ever built this, but she deals chill damage equal to 2 times of the remaining chill damage and removes chill effect when attacking the chilled enemy, and increases chill damage by 25% if her HP is 60% or less. So overall with her, you're going to use her for chill, as I said. She's going to have chill explosion, and she's going to have a lot of different sources for chill damage. She's actually one of the, believe it or not, one of the more versatile chill dealers in the game outside of your Fess characters. So she's kind of a character I feel like has been overlooked for a long time, but she's definitely useful in some of the Immortal dungeons and the places where it would call for chill damage in general. And you see a lot of players that are even beyond the intermediate and the beginner status who will use her quite a bit for those types of situations, and you see them do it with a lot of success. And the reason for that is just the variety of chill that she has on her kit. You see there with her skills, she has chill on quite a few of her skills as well as her cores, so having that and the chill explosion is very beneficial to her. It makes her kind of stand out from the pack amongst these other characters in green, and overall she's a character that you should probably consider building in general. The only reason I haven't done so with mine is, believe it or not, I never really get memories for this character, and so I haven't really felt the need to go ahead and unlock all of her cores and do all those things with her yet, because I just don't have the ability to build her up to where I would need her to be to use her to her truest extent anyway. But you know, with her though, if you do have memories laying around, or if you have her and you're just starting out, I would go ahead and build her up. You'll probably get a lot of mileage out of her, You know, and she has some pretty nice finishers for kind of length as well. So if you are looking for that, then that's not too bad. Also, she doesn't have finishers that are anywhere near as long as some of the best in the game, but they're not too bad. So yeah, overall though, you use her mainly just for the chill damage, like I said. But speaking of swimsuit characters, let's talk about another popular one amongst not only new players but also veteran players, and that's going to be Swimsuit K. So he's going to increase Green Element Fighter's attack by 50% with his leadership skill, but he would definitely take advantage of Blue Mary's leadership skill if for whatever reason you wanted to use him there. But when it comes to this K, he is going to have Burn and Burn Explosion, and that is kind of his claim to fame amongst these gold border element characters. So really with him, you're just going to use him for the burn damage, but also as a quality striker for burn. Kind of like we had talked about, and we will talk about later on in this video with another character that has burn on their kit. He has kind of found his niche as a striker in specific modes to help with burn damage. So if I've had somebody in the comments actually ask me one day if, and I forget their name, but if strikers were important or if they were something that you could kind of just ignore. And my response was, it depends on the game mode basically, but strikers are very important. Depending, as you'll see there, he's inflicting burn damage equal to 3% of attack for 10 seconds. But with him, he is very good for a striker for things like the guild raid, and strikers are important depending on where you're at. And I would argue that they're important in most any mode. You know, some are just going to be more important than others. So with this K though, you'll definitely want to use him for some of those things because he allows some of your characters that don't have burn on their kit to be viable in those situations. And that's important for some of these characters to be able to have that sort of ability to go into some of these modes, because while they may not have the preferential status debuffs and things that you would need, having a striker that can give that to them and give them access to that in a way is very important. And this K isn't bad in his own right. K is kind of nice in general, all the Ks are, for having a very long finisher. Yes, it is a 5 PG, but at the same time, it is going to stop the clock for quite a bit of time. So again, if you are in the kind of market for a burn character as a budget player or a new player, then this K is actually very strong. And you'll notice that some of these characters that are lumped together, like the swimsuit characters, the Wonderland characters, and some of these characters that are in the same kind of family, so to speak, they all tend to be halfway decent and can play off of each other. So let's go ahead and talk about kind of a generic green option, and that's going to be Mature. So this Mature has been in the game for a very long time. Her leadership skill is going to give 25% of attack and power charge rate by 20% and HP to green element fighters, and she's going to have bleed on her kit as well, and she's going to be kind of more of a crit based character. She isn't anything that is super special, her and the next character we're going to talk about. This is where we start to talk about kind of just your generic green gold border characters, but she is not a bad option. Overall, she's actually been used quite a bit in the past by kind of, you know, the veterans who are more not veterans for their entire KOF All-Star career type of situation. You know, I actually used her for a little bit. I was never as big into her. I actually never really had the need for her. But I do know quite a few players that used to use her for specific things, or when they were just kind of coming up and learning the game or trying to get through content, because her skills overall aren't bad. She's actually a half decent character animation-wise with some of her skills, but she is definitely outdated now, as is the case with a lot of gold border characters. She isn't going to be anything that is groundbreaking, but overall with her, you just want to use her as kind of just a easy-to-get option for green. She has a green defense, so that might come in handy. I would definitely not recommend building her up enough to get her to that point in Reviving Hell's Dungeon. But, you know, at that point, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose, but I do think there are better options. However, overall, if you need a quality budget option for just your normal gold border characters without any of the bells and whistles, then she's definitely not the worst option. But moving on to another character that's kind of in the same family as her, we're going to talk about Yuri here. So she's going to increase green element fighters' attack by 50%, so not a bad leadership skill overall. If you take a look at her cores, she's going to have crit rate increase, and then she's going to have a 40% chance to obtain 3 additional combos when attacking. So not anything going on with her cores there, really. This Yuri, the reason why I'm recommending her really at all is because she does do decent damage for a kind of normal gold border character. Again, she is an older character, so she is getting outdated, just like most of these characters are. They don't add gold borders in as frequently as they used to, so a lot of these characters are just getting old. But overall with her, if you need another easy-to-get option, she's actually one that I did use quite a bit when I was kind of learning the game and trying to get through some of the story modes and things for the first time. And she still holds up, I would say. You know, she, again, is going to be an outdated character, but the damage output for her has always been very good. And so if you're somebody that lacks a lot of character variety, specifically you lack a lot of FES, then she's going to be a pretty good overall option. I would say that, you know, give her a chance, get her up to level 90, and then try her out. You'll probably be impressed with her attack output. You know, obviously, later on, you're going to be much more impressed with better characters, but at the same time, again, for people who are just trying to get into the game and trying to do it on a budget, then she is going to do you pretty well. So, yeah, that is going to be Yuri Sakazaki. And yeah, not a bad option, but let's move on to a character that's more of a striker than anything, and that is going to be the New Year's Greeting Mai. So I'm not going to get into her kit a ton, kind of like with all the rest of these characters, but instead I'm just going to kind of recommend her as a striker to you guys. You'll see she inflicts burn damage equal to 10% of attack to all enemies for 1 second for 10 seconds. So another character that is a quality burn striker, and the same kind of tips apply with her as they did with the Swimsuit K. I will say the Swimsuit K is definitely a better overall kind of character than this Mai is, in my opinion. All the Mais tend to be very similar across the board with kind of the way their skills work and things of that nature. She does have that different kind of S1 going on for her there, as you'll see. Her S2, though, is kind of the usual fare. And then, without much of a difference in animation, her S3 is basically the same thing, but with a bigger fan. So, you know, overall with Mai, you kind of know what you're getting into. She's got burn on her kit. She's going to have burn explosion. So she's not a bad character at all. It's just that I don't really necessarily think that Mai is kind of slow, and that's kind of always been the issue with these Mais. They tend to kind of have just kind of goofy timing with their skills and things like that. Really the only Mai that I care for in this game is the purple balance one. Otherwise, the rest of these Mais, I would say, really just have niche uses overall. But yeah, you would probably just want to use her as a striker, but a very good one at that. Moving on to False Advent Orochi. This is actually one that I considered whether or not I wanted to put him on here or not, because I was like, well, if you're a beginner or an intermediate, are you going to need gold border character by the time you're able to get him? And I was like, well, for the sake of being a completionist, let's put him on here. So this is going to be the False Advent Orochi, and really with him, his skills are what sells him. He's going to have HP recovery on his S1, he's going to increase his skill damage when his power's 2 or more on his S2, and then he's going to have super armor on his S3. Overall, this Advent Orochi is pretty decent. For those of you who do not know, you have to get him through the Epic Quest, so it's a character that you will have to kind of grind for and unlock. And like I said, I'm not sure how many new or intermediate players are going to benefit from him by the time they're able to unlock him. By the time they've progressed their account enough to be able to even have him, they'll probably have outgrown a lot of these characters. But again, I just wanted to put him on here because I knew that somebody was going to, in the comments, be like, well, what about Orochi? Orochi has a lot of fans out there, and I know in the past I've said I'm not the biggest fan of Orochi. People always take that as me being overly negative on these characters. It's just that I personally have never had a fan reaction to this character in the franchise. The only thing I've ever seen him as is the big baddie. He's not a character that I'm hateful towards or I have some issue with. He's just a character that I've never kind of gravitated towards the way I have with some of the other villains, like, a Rugal or a Geese, but, everybody's different. But I wanted to put him on here partially for just completionist reasons to make sure this was somewhat comprehensive, but also appease you guys as well. So, yeah, there's your False Advent Orochi. Definitely one I would recommend. Great finishers, great character, but I just don't know if you'd be using him by the time you get to that point. So, next up we have Lovely Mei Li. And she's going to increase defense-type fighters' attack by 35% and decrease their damage received by 12%. This Mei Li is, I'm going to say, probably a little bit weaker kit-wise than the other one, in my opinion. I mean, she's still not bad for a gold border option, but she has a green defense, which means in the future with RHD you could maybe use her as a budget option for a third, but when she's attacked she reflects damage, 15% of the damage that is, and then she's going to increase her attack equal to 35% of her defense, so she does have defense to attack conversion. She has super armor with an interrupt. She has super armor again on her second skill with a 60% chance to ignore the target's guard. So she has 2 sources of super armor, which is nice, and then she disables guard for 2 seconds upon landing a skill with the rest 3. So she isn't a bad character overall, just that her kit, it isn't necessarily geared as much towards PvE, but it can be useful. It's not bad at all, but I do think that the other one is a tad bit more useful for PvE, but it's splitting hairs at that point. They're both pretty good for what you'd be using them for, so I wanted to put her on here because she's very good for similar reasons to the other Mei Li that we had talked about in yesterday's video. So overall with her too, one of the nice things is her finisher, which is going to be her card finisher, you'll see coming up here, is actually a very long animation as well. So that is very nice. It's always good to have characters that can kind of eat up clock like that. So yeah, overall this Mei Li, not a bad option. Like I said, she is going to be probably one of the better options overall in this pool. She's one of the newer ones as well, so her stats are going to reflect that. So overall, not a bad pick. But yeah, that pretty much is going to finish it up for the kind of regular gold border characters, the ASs and the normals. So we're going to move on now and talk about the super budget options for team relays and low cost missions that I've used in the past and gotten through easily. So this Mai, not bad at all. I'm not going to get too much into all these skills, but you're going to notice that a lot of these characters decrease their base cooldowns. So that is part of the reason why I use some of these. Anything that is going to decrease cooldowns or help with power charge rate or fiddle with your power charge at all is going to be beneficial for these kind of really budget options. So if you're ever wondering what a good rule of thumb is with some of these budget characters, look for ones that are going to help increase your power charge for them or decrease the skill cooldowns. That's typically going to be where you're going to get the most bang for your buck with these characters. But yeah, I used all of these to success in the relay dungeons as well as some of the other kind of low-cost missions like in the Epic Quest and things of that nature. So, these are characters that, really at the end of the day, you can use you could probably, with enough investment, use any of them with success in those missions. But if you want to make your life easier, some of these here are going to be kind of your better options. And this is nothing unique to me. This is not like I discovered that these characters were useful for this. A lot of players have used the exact same kind of budget options as I'm showing you here to get through these things. So with these, just kind of pick through these, build teams around some of these here for those low-cost missions. I know a lot of you have asked me in the past about that, and so if you use these, then you'll probably have some pretty good luck. But like I said, a good kind of rule of thumb is look for ones that are going to help with their cooldowns or help power charge rate, and that's going to kind of be the ones you want to stick with, because none of these are going to have a ton of options on their kit for, things like bleed or burn or dot or anything like that. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be the super budget options there, just kind of a quick montage of them. But let's go ahead and move on, speaking of montages, to the collab characters. So obviously you already see right off the bat, this is Paul. He is a Tekken character. A lot of people may not realize this, but Paul actually aged the best out of any of the Tekken characters as far as utility goes and kind of usefulness. A lot of it just comes down to his leadership skill. His leadership skill is very, very strong. It's basically Orochi Yuri's leadership skill, but he has an interrupt, he has super armor, he has increase to his crit rate, he has a 100% chance to ignore guard. So overall, this is still a fantastic character to this day, especially if you need a budget version of Yuri. Kondo here. So Kondo, he is basically just a troll character. You've probably run into him in the past in old Infinite Battle kind of situations where you're attacking him and he just doesn't seem to want to die. That's because you can put damage reflect on him. You can put things to soak damage, things of that nature, and he just becomes a troll. He's not anything super special whatsoever. His skills actually kind of suck as far as their animations and things, but yeah, if you want a good troll character, there's your troll. So Jin Kazama, another case of you probably don't have him if you're a beginner or an intermediate. Most people that are veterans don't even have Tekken characters at this point. But again, just for sake of fitting these in here and being as close to kind of comprehensive as possible, I decided to just throw him in the montage. But yeah, I mean, this Jin is very good. He's not as good, and you know, neither of the Jins are great anymore for much things outside of generic PvE stuff, but he's not as good as Hoodie Jin, but he's definitely a very strong free-to-play version. And yeah, like I said, you're probably not going to have him, unfortunately. I really hope they bring Tekken back for you guys. You know, I have all that stuff, and I feel bad, though, for the players who don't, because it's tough for me sometimes, because some of that stuff you need for some of this stuff, and it's tough for me to just be sitting here telling you to use it, you know, knowing you don't have it. But Kofi here, Kofi's always been popular since his release amongst kind of budget players. Kofi overall is pretty strong. You may have him since WWE isn't as old as some of these other collabs at this point, although it is starting to get there, I suppose. But, you know, Kofi is a character that a lot of people use to help with RHD and things like that. They used him as like a third on their team just to kind of have a character to help them get through the first couple tiers and things like that when he was released. So, you know, he's a good character overall, but I would say that as far as green element fighters go, you can do better. I'm not as big a fan as other people are of him, but he isn't bad also. So I'm pretty sure that pretty much covers it. So I think we're finally through this guide. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I know that, you know, for me personally as a content creator, I try to appease everybody and give everybody something, you know, whether they're beginner, intermediate, or veteran. Of course, being a veteran myself and liking to do the endgame content, my channel is more geared towards that kind of stuff. And so you will probably notice that, you know, most of my content is geared towards the veterans, and I do take a bit of a bath on the views on these videos because I don't have as many beginner and intermediate fans that watch this channel. They watch me for, you know, the high damage Immortal runs or Guild Raid runs, or my characters being all A5 or A4 or whatever the case may be. So these guides are a little bit different, but I do want to make sure I use my channel as a way to help everybody. So, and I know that the gold border / silver border / bronze border character discussion has come up a million times, and it's because there's just not a lot of really good resources out there for it. And hopefully now for new players or beginner players or veteran players, if they need to kind of point people in a direction that are asking for those things, we'll have something to point them to, because before I know that there just hasn't been a lot out there for this kind of content. So I wanted to make sure I put it out there for you guys so somebody had it at their disposal, because it can be overwhelming as a new player to enter this game without any knowledge and without resources like this to help them. And I'm not saying that, you know, by any means am I the most comprehensive with these things as, you know, other people, but, you know, these things, like I said, weren't out there before, so I wanted to make sure I put them out there. But that's the video, guys. We're finally done with this series. I hope you enjoyed it if you've been watching it. If you did, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow with the big review for Shane, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Peace.
Continue.